Hello and welcome to the 7th video in my What I'm Planting Today series. My name's Jenna and I'm gardening in Midwestern Ohio, Zone 6A, with a last approximate spring frost date of May 10th. Today, April 19th, I'm sitting about 3 weeks from that last spring frost date, but the Ohio weather continues to keep us on our toes. Down in the 20s last week, with a high of 80 degrees and sunny yesterday. So besides continuing to plant out cool season crops outdoors and start seed indoors, I'm also busy moving my frost cloth to make room for shade cloth in the garden. So let's start with what I am planting outdoors today. First up, I'm transplanting my celery and celeriac. Most of the planting advice I've seen says to plant out celery and celeriac after the weather has settled, after that last spring frost. However, here in Ohio, I have great results with transplanting out well-established, well-hardened off seedlings 2 to 3 weeks before my last spring frost date. And I do cover these with frost cloth if the nighttime temperatures dip below freezing. Bolting can supposedly be caused by exposing young plants to temperatures below 55 degrees Fahrenheit for a week and a half or more, but I've never had my celery bolt early on me. But I'm also really careful with the varieties that I select for my garden. I opt for varieties which are very stress tolerant. The two I've had the best luck with and continue to plant year after year are Kelvin and Marengo. Brilliant and Yara continue to be my best performing celeriac varieties. I'm curious though, if any of you have a growing climate that's similar to mine, if you grow celery and celeriac, when do you plant it out? And if you plant it later in the season, do you have good luck with it? I'm also transplanting my fennel today, specifically bulb fennel. This is one of my favorite garden crops to grow, and once I figured out the timing and the varieties that work well here, it's surprisingly easy. Check out this video for more details. I'm finishing up with planting the very last of my potatoes. I'll generally start planting potatoes here early to mid-March, depending on what the weather is doing. But I don't have good results if I plant any later than about mid to the 3rd week of April. I've mentioned this in prior videos, but potatoes generally shut down tuber production after the temperatures start to climb above about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So the earlier I can get them planted and thus harvested, the better. Now, as far as direct sowing goes, I'm only planting 2 things today. First are my nasturtiums, a favorite garden annual of mine. I love tucking nasturtiums in and around my veggies. The beneficial insects love the blooms, and I do too. I often snack on these flowers when I'm working in my garden. They have a sweet, peppery kind of flavor, and they're high in vitamin C and other antioxidants. Just make sure that there are no little bees or other bugs in the blooms before you pop them in your mouth. All parts of the nasturtium are actually edible, including the leaves, seeds, stems, and roots. One word of caution with nasturtiums though, if you're planting in your vegetable beds and they're very, very fertile, especially if they're high in nitrogen or you're using high nitrogen fertilizers on your vegetables, nasturtium's response to high levels of nitrogen is actually to put on a lot of foliar growth at the expense of blooms. So if you're growing nasturtiums and they're just huge and leafy and green and beautiful, but they're not blooming, that might be the problem. I'm also sowing my last batch of beets for the spring season. However, I will be planting beets again later in the summer for a fall harvest. I'm just starting a few seeds indoors today, and they just happen to all be flowering climbers. I'm growing Cardinal Climber for the first time, and I can't wait to see this hummingbird and butterfly magnet in action. I had no idea until recently that Cardinal Climbers actually came from a cross by an Ohio home gardener, Logan Slaughter, back in 1908. He crossed red morning glory with cypress vine to get this beautiful red blooming climber. It's also unique in that it's a hybrid that reproduces true to type. I'm also starting my Ruby Moon Hyacinth Beans. These could technically be direct sown, but since it's a longer season item, 110 to 120 days, I like to get a jump start on growth by starting indoors. This is another plant with edible flowers, supposedly a mild, sweet, bean-like flavor, though I've never actually tried them. I love them solely for the color and for attracting pollinators to the garden. And finally, today I'm starting moonflowers. Ipomia alba, sometimes called night blooming morning glory, not to be confused with the datura, devil's trumpet, that also sometimes goes by the same name. Again, another that could be technically direct sown, but I like the jump start that indoor sowing gives me. I find this plant absolutely enchanting, and I love going out to the garden after dusk to find these huge white flowers glowing in the twilight. This is one that, like morning glories, can become a self-seeding nightmare in some growing areas, but my season here must not be long enough or warm enough because I have never even had a single volunteer pop up. And I'll be starting a few more seeds indoors before my last spring frost date, but the big planting push comes right about the middle of May for me. So if you want to catch everything that I am planting out after my spring frost date, be sure to subscribe to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.